I'm going to invite you to turn in the Old Testament to the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth. We're going to be doing some reflecting on what our culture around us is celebrating as Mother's Day, but focusing on a biblical concept and the importance of what a mother, Christian mother, is called upon to do. And as we look at this in the book of Ruth, I want to read the first 18 verses of Ruth chapter 1. The word of the Lord. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah was sent to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and had given them food. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. I would like to focus our attention from Ruth chapter 1 on verses 16 and 17, Ruth's response to Naomi when Naomi encourages her to return to Moab. But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you." And the text begins here, "For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. May God add a blessing to the hearing of his word. Beloved in our Lord Jesus Christ, I see from the sign that you have out on the road that you also are recognizing that today is a day in which we need to be reflecting in our culture, and they certainly are reflecting on the concept of motherhood, celebrating mothers. Unfortunately, in our culture today, motherhood has fallen in bad lines. There has been much talk today about motherhood that doesn't reflect much of what the scriptures teach us about mothers and motherhood. And it's important for us as Christians, when we rub shoulders with those who are a part of our communities, in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our workplace. On Monday morning, when you rub shoulders with some of the folks that you are regularly in contact with, it may be a great opportunity and to introduce the topic. So how was your Mother's Day? And open the topic of the importance of what the Bible teaches us about motherhood. We have an example of that in Naomi, and particularly as it relates to her daughter-in-law, Ruth. Now, Ruth is faced with a crossroads in her life. Have you ever come to a point where you are at a juncture in the road of life and a decision needs to be made as to which way to turn? For some, it may be the choice of a profession after recently graduating from high school or college. Or some may be looking at a change in profession. It's a bit unsettling, isn't it? For others, it may be a job offer that you have received and you are wondering, shall I take it? Or a major move. Others may be deciding that it's time to go into business. That's a huge step, crossroads, an important decision that needs to be made in our text. Naomi, having been born and raised amongst the people of Israel in Bethlehem, where she had been living, because of famine, had to move to Moab, where she marries a Moabite man by the name of Elimelech, and has two sons who are married and has now then two daughters-in-law. And Ruth is one of the daughters-in-law, of whom, after Naomi's husband and two sons have passed away, and decides to go back to her people in Bethlehem, and encourages both Oprah and Ruth to go back to Moab after having traveled with her for a while. Oprah initially says she'll go with her all the way, but then turns back. Ruth, however, as we find in our text, has made a choice to stay with Naomi. Why? That's what we want to see here as we see a relationship between Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi, but it's not about a mother or a mother-in-law and a daughter and a daughter-in-law. It's about faith. It's about placing our faith commitment at the highest priority in our lives. That's what this is about. And it's a faith that rests on the one who was to come to Bethlehem years later, the person of Jesus Christ. That's what this is all about. Ruth responds to Naomi's invitation with three things that I want to make a point of in our message today. First, she says to Naomi, "Where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge." And then, secondly, she says, "Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." Thirdly, in verse 17, she says, "Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." And she concludes with me, "The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." That's an important decision now that Ruth needs to make. Where you go, I will go. There's a destination in mind. If you're going somewhere, there's a final destination, is it not? So there's a destination that is being considered here. It's as if she says, "Where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, where you make your dwelling," Naomi, that's what the word lodge is all about. "Where you make your lodge, where you make your dwelling, I will also make my dwelling." They point out a destination, but the destination is not, first of all, a geographic destination. Oh, it may be something that Ruth had been thinking about, a geographical destination called Bethlehem. The destination is what is found in Bethlehem, and that is God's people. The destination that Ruth is reflecting on here as well is the destination of God and his people. She wants to be where she can get with Naomi's people. Surely she has come to know the Lord while she has been spending time with her husband, and Naomi, as a God-fearing woman in a distant land away from other God-fearing women and families. She wants to be where she can get the support of family and friends. That's where Naomi is going for her destination, ultimately straight into the arms of God. That's the destination that's at play here. Ruth wanted what Naomi had. And in doing so, she had to make this trip together with Naomi. It's not just a choice between living with her family and the people that she had grown up with. It's a choice of what her religious environment would be. We'll talk about the environment in just a moment, in the second point, more particularly. Would she follow God as a destination, or would she follow the gods of her people in Moab? That's what's at play here. Now, Naomi clearly had the privilege of having quite an influence on her daughters-in-law. She had raised her sons to know the Lord, in spite of the fact that a famine had forced them to be away from their religious environment. But Naomi, as a mother, plays an important role in the lives of her children. And it's important for us to see the faith that Naomi shows as being critically important in her life passed along to her sons, first of all, and then to the wives, including Ruth. Ruth had lost her father-in-law, Elimelech. She had lost her brother-in-law. She had lost her husband. But there was one thing that was not lost in all of this, and that was her faith. Her desire to continue to follow in the faith that she had been taught by her mother-in-law. Naomi plays an important role model as a Christian mother for her family. Mothers, present here, a question. If your children were to model their faith life after your example of a faith life, what would that example look like for them, and what would they be following? Think about that. Are you, as mothers, showing a depth of faith? Are you showing an example of faith? Are you walking in the faith so that your children can see the example that you are setting for them in providing for the faith life of your children? Fathers, this is important for you too as head of the home. Providing for your wives in a way that she, together with you, is able to do that which is needed to be done in order to provide an ongoing, generation to generation, faith life that's a part of us. Through nurture, that's what mothers are known for. Through the warmth and the love and the affection is passed along from you to your children, and to their children, your grandchildren. There may be some great-grandparents here, your great-grandchildren. Remember that as Ruth came to faith, it was a living faith in which she also had children, and they had children, and they had children, and they had children, whose son eventually was Jesus Christ. She was from the genealogy of Jesus Christ. In Matthew chapter 1, verse 5, we read that Ruth's name is specifically mentioned as a part of the heritage that Jesus' family was a part of. Your people. I will go, rather, where you go, and I will lodge where you lodge. Secondly, Ruth says, your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where the first point might have been a destination, God, in mind, here we have a focus on an environment. In what environment am I going to live? In what environment am I going to raise my children? It's in the environment of the people of God that she makes her commitment. She makes a deliberate commitment here to leave the religion of the gods of Moab, the false gods, I might add, of Moab, in which she had grown up, in favor of the true God. And this is what we see happening. She wanted what Naomi had, as we saw, and she knew that if she were to remain in Moab, she would lose the precious gift of a relationship, not first of all with Naomi, that too, but a relationship with God that she saw in Naomi. So we have here a choice not just between people, but a choice of an environment in which she chooses to raise her family and to grow in her own faith commitment too. Ruth was very much aware of the fact that she would be influenced by the people that she spent the majority of her time with. We are influenced by people around us. There is a saying today that's very popular. Tell me who your friends are, and I will tell you who you are. Because we become very much like our friends and those who we spend time with. Church family is an important part of molding us. The Christian school to send our children to is an environment to mold our children in the teachings that are consistent with the home. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God, says Ruth. Naomi had taught Ruth about the faith, and Ruth wanted to be the kind of a Christian woman that her mother-in-law was. She wanted to be that kind of a mother to her children as well, and that was important for her. Your people. The concept of people is very important in the Old Testament and carrying on into the New Testament and flowing into our time since that time as well. Familiar words. People. Because they are the words that are used in the covenant relationship that God makes with us. When he says, I will be your God, and you will be my what? My people. My people. Ruth was making a commitment to be a part of God's people in the choice that she makes here. Have you ever wondered what keeps a family together today? Is it money that keeps our families together? Well, what happens when things don't go so well in our farm or in our jobs or in our employment, wherever we have, and money is no longer there? Is that going to shake your family? Is it based on a career that you have? What happens when that career becomes obsolete or something happens and you are laid off or you no longer are being squeezed out of whatever employment you have? Is that going to have an effect on your family? What keeps your family together? We can't base it on having a nice home, because a house, physical bricks and mortar, can quickly be taken down by a tornado or burned up in a fire, and all the goods that are within it. We can't depend on that. We look at this and we see that the family needs a more dependable foundation. And that foundation is what Ruth yearns for, what Naomi has set an example for as a mother, and that is the foundation of a relationship with Jesus Christ. That's what this is all about. This passage has Jesus written through the whole passage, because the faith that Ruth is reflecting on here is a faith not in her mother-in-law. It's a faith in Jesus Christ, who is to come. And we look at this and then we begin to understand how important that is for our families also to be united in faith, in a faith commitment. And that's why we take time in our families to spend time in devotions around the table, to spend time in bedtime devotions with our children, to spend time talking to our children about how their day has gone and how we can bring in a word of encouragement from the Scriptures to whatever's going on in the family and in the life of that particular child at that particular moment, what happened at school, what happened at the play yard, what happened anywhere. That's what we see happening here when Naomi and Ruth reflect on that. And when Ruth specifically says to Naomi, your people, God's people, will be my people, and your God will be my God. So I will carry on with you. That's the environment in which I want to raise my family and in the environment in which I want to grow in my faith. Then, thirdly, Ruth responds by saying in verse 17, where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death separates me from you. Those are strong words, aren't they? Those are words that reflect on a lifelong commitment. Until I die, I want to commit myself to this. And so we see that in this third part of her answer, we've seen the destination as God, we've seen the environment as God's people, and this is a commitment, a lifelong commitment with roots in it, that Ruth is making here. She wants to follow God in everything until the day that she dies. It's a permanent decision, a permanent commitment that she is making. And on what does she base this commitment as she's at this juncture in the road? Think about this. Does she base it on personal preferences? If she based it on personal preferences, she would probably have gone back to Moab because it would have been a whole lot easier to go back with her own people. Wouldn't it have been? She doesn't know all of what lies ahead as she travels back with Naomi to Bethlehem, a strange land for her, strange culture for her, strange ways for her. If she had her own personal druthers, her personal preference, she would go back to her own people. We like familiarity, don't we? That which is familiar to us. That's our human nature. But she doesn't base her commitment on that. Neither does she base her commitment on feelings. If she were to base her choice and commitment on feelings, she was no doubt filled with fear. That's a feeling. Anxiety, worry, concern. I'm not really sure, uncertainty, what's ahead, and I feel like, you ever do that? And when we base our choices in life on feelings, feelings go up and down. And when they're at a low point, we will make one decision. When they're at a high point, we will do completely the opposite. We will waffle back and forth like the winds of time when we depend on our feelings. We cannot, and Ruth does not, depend on her feelings. Her decision is based and depends on a commitment that she makes, a lifelong commitment that she makes to follow the Lord. With the help of Naomi, her mother, and with the help of those into which community she is now traveling, who will guide her along, will recognize that she is a baby in the faith and needs to be helped along in her faith walk. It's important for her to see that. Ruth tells Naomi that she wants to live the rest of her life with God's people. And she would need to have a reminder of this commitment that she would make from time to time. When she made a choice, when she makes a choice, and when she does something that isn't consistent with the commitment that she had made, she would need to have a reminder from those around her saying, remember the decision, the choice that you made when you left Moab? Remember that when you are making this choice now too, and if you've not done it well, rethink it. We need reminders in our lives. I don't doubt that Ruth will have missed her family and her friends during the time that she was in Bethlehem. And no doubt she would at times question the commitment that she had made. She needs that reminder. We need the reminder of commitments that we make. Next week, Sunday, you will have an opportunity to be reminded of the commitment that you have made to follow the Lord Jesus Christ with the celebration of the Lord's Supper. We'll talk more about that this afternoon. In God's providence, you are at the point in the study of the Catechism, Lord's Day 28, in which you will be reflecting on the first part of the Catechism's Lord's Days, of the three of them that are there, on the Lord's Supper. And we'll look at that this afternoon. But the Lord's Supper for now, just to be reminded of that, is a reminder to us of commitments that we have made. That's what Ruth needs, and we need those same things, because it's so easy for us to get tempted to let the things of the world get in the way of our judgment. We may not always feel like we want to follow the Lord, but our decision to follow Jesus and his role in our lives is not based on that feeling that will come and go. Whether you feel like it or not, you have made a commitment to follow the Lord and to be a part of his fellowship. And that's what we will be remembering as we are reminded of those of us who have made a public profession of our faith and are reminded of those commitments. Those of us who have made baptismal vows for our children are reminded also of commitments that you have made at the time of the baptism of your children. The sacraments are for us also a constant reminder that is placed before us in our own lives. Ruth knew what she was looking for because God had touched her heart through Naomi, and she went for it. She left all behind, friends, family, comfort, home, everything, to follow Jesus. Are you prepared to leave everything and follow Jesus? It's a major commitment. It's a life-changing commitment. And it is a commitment that needs to be recommitted, not just on Sundays when we gather for worship, not just on those times when we celebrate the Lord's Supper that we need to recommit. It's a daily recommitment of our promises made, where God has said to us, I will be your God, and we have committed ourselves to be his people. There is a sacrifice. Ruth, as we see, made her sacrifices. But that sacrifice pales in comparison any sacrifice we need to make to follow Jesus Christ, to invite him into our lives if we have not already done so. That sacrifice pales in comparison to the sacrifice that Jesus Christ has made for you. The sacrifice that God made when he gave up his only Son, Jesus Christ. The sacrifice that Jesus made when he went up to the cross, ready to die, to take on the eternal punishment for our sins because of his grace in our lives. May we be reminded of our faith commitments that we have made. If we have not made that faith commitment, now is the time to make that commitment to follow Jesus Christ. And may we be encouraged in that as we live that experience every day of our lives. Amen.